I've talked to a bunch of people. I've had, I don't know, do you know Tino Sanandaji from
Yes,
Sweden?
I know, of course.
Okay, so I've had him on, and I get a lot of mail from people in Sweden particularly, but Denmark also,
Yeah.
talking about the rise of Islamism and talking about how this is happening in the mosques, and it's happening in the public square now, and we know that there's a rape epidemic and a whole series of problems. So if the best defense is to let these people say what they want, but isn't the problem that we're still seeing these bad ideas rise?
Well,
Because is the problem of Islamism worse now than it was, say, 5 years ago in Denmark?
it is.
So then
But
isn't that an inherent conflict then with the idea of sort of full free speech?
No,
Which again, I'm for.
Yeah, I think you have to go further back to identify the root causes. We had an understanding. I mean, I taught immigrants the Danish language 25, 30 years ago in Denmark. And my wife is an immigrant herself, by the way, from the former Soviet Union. And we had this understanding, if people arrive and they just stay long enough in our country, they will become like us. Mm-hmm. Without, telling them what the rules of the game are, what our values are, and so on and so forth. And today we understand that this doesn't happen in and by itself. Even if you learn the language, it doesn't mean that you start to support the values and the foundation of society. So we have been too weak on communicating the foundation of our society and why free speech matters to us, and why you have to accept that your religion may be object of satire and criticism and so on and so forth, that homosexuality is not a criminal offense, that equality between the sexes is crucial. I mean, it's one of the most important things we achieved in the second half of the 20th century. And we're not willing to give that up. And we have been very bad at communicating these ideas, and it all exploded during the cartoon crisis.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we still talk about those cartoons, because that conflict made it very clear, this clash of values. So no, I don't think that there is an inherent conflict. I mean, we had anti-democratic movements and forces also during the Cold War. We had a legal communist party in Denmark that wanted to overthrow the government. They sat in parliament. They had their own newspapers. They had their own unions. They had their own festivals. They had their own schools. But we did not criminalize them. We confronted them and had this debate in public. And it turned out in the end that reason and the values of liberty prevailed.
Yeah, so this is really, sunlight is the best disinfectant argument, that eventually these things will crumble because they don't lead us to actual human liberty and the things that people want, really.
Yeah, and if we want to get more Muslims on our side, we have to be consistent and make it clear to them that if there are individuals, dissenters within Muslim communities, they have an opportunity to leave their religion, and we have an obligation to protect them.
Yeah, I suspect I know the answer to this, but when I've had certain people, including Ayan and Majid Nawaz and other Muslim reformers like Faisal Said al-Matar and Ali Rizvi and Sarah Haider and many of these people on the show, there's been a theme which is that the left abandoned them. They started talking about these ideas, not being bigots in that they are brown themselves, and that their families often are still practicing Muslims. In the case of Majid, he still is Muslim. Some of them are ex-Muslims. But that they felt abandoned by the side that they wanted as their ally, or that should have been their natural ally. I suspect you got plenty of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's true, because if you look at the Enlightenment and the West, the criticism of religion came from the left, but the left abandoned its insistence on criticizing religion when Islam arrived and became a hot issue. And I think that's diametral the core values of the left. I mean, religion is power, and it's a way to establish social control, whether it is by Christianity, by Islam, or by other kinds of religion. And in Denmark, I mean, the Socialist Party in Denmark, for 50 years, they were in favor of getting rid of the blasphemy law. Mm-hmm. Today, they defend the blasphemy law because they now believe it's important to have it to protect Muslims, and I think that's crazy.
Are people right now being prosecuted under the blasphemy law?
No. It's a sleeping law, I would say. Mm-hmm. But we see that hate speech law. We also have a law against racism, mm-hmm. and we see that the people are in fact being prosecuted for racism, for saying things that actually is blasphemy. For instance, comparing Islam with Nazism. But it's criticism of ideas, not of individuals. So there also is a slippery slope in that direction.
So what do you make of the far-right parties that seem to be growing throughout Europe? I'm not sure. Is there a far-right party that's now gaining momentum in Denmark? I don't know specifically.
I mean, depends on on how to define it.
I don't like the phrase far-right anymore,
exactly.
because our whole thing is so crossed up now that I think what used to be far-right is thought now as more center, because they're the only ones talking about certain issues, and that then brings in a lot of centrist people who otherwise wouldn't vote for the right.
We have two parties of this kind. One, an old party that in fact is the second biggest party in Denmark, the Danish People's Party, which I would say is the second social democratic party opposed to immigration. And then we have a rather new party that is more conservative, for small government, but also anti-immigration. But I would not call them far right. I mean, they are not outside. They don't want to undermine the political order, through violence. Like for instance, in Greece, you have Golden Dawn,
right,
which is more a fascist movement, and they have nothing in common with Golden Dawn, even not with Marine Le Pen in France.
Yeah. Do you think that this is the route that Europe is going to go? It seems like it's just going to be the reaction to what has happened. Merkel opened the doors to 1.1 million people or so, and even if 95% of them integrate perfectly, it doesn't take a lot of people. Well, first of all, 1.1 is a lot of people, but it doesn't take a lot of people to sow a lot of chaos.
Yeah, a couple of points. I think polarization will intensify. This year we will have an election in the Netherlands where a populist party, Geert Wilders, probably he will not get to run the government, but he may become the biggest party.
What do you think? Someone like Geert, do you? Because I know he's sort of. A lot of people that I trust basically say he really straddles the line.
I had a debate with him, absolutely, and we disagree on the two most fundamental building blocks of a democracy: equality and freedom. Equality before the law and the right to freedom of expression, freedom of religion. He is in favor, if he gets the power, to abandon the right to freedom of religion for Muslims, building mosques, having faith-based schools, and so on and so forth, and also to freedom of speech. He wants to ban the Quran. So he's not willing to provide the same fundamental freedoms to Muslims as to Christians, atheists, and other individuals. Mm-hmm. So we disagree on the building blocks. And the funny thing is that if he gets into power, he will use exactly the same hate speech law against Muslims that the current government has used against him.
Right.
For demonizing Muslims.
Which he's being persecuted. He's
been convicted.
He's been convicted.
Yes, which I think is crazy.
So he can still run though.
Yes.
Even though
for him it's a huge victory because he will use that as a card in the election campaign. Yeah. It's the best outcome he could only dream of. In fact, so we will see more polarization, and I think the underlying narrative here is that that after the Second World War, because of Nazism and fascism, Europe has in a way celebrated diversity, which is great in many ways. I mean, I also like diversity. But at the same time, Europe has not been willing to face its own history. And the fact of the matter is that Europe has been very bad at managing diversity throughout its own history. After the First World War, you had 4 empires falling apart, and you saw the creation of a lot of homogeneous nation states in order to build a safe, a sustainable peace. After the Second World War, you switched populations in Europe in order to reinforce homogeneous nation states. Mm-hmm. So Europe, in fact, has tried to build homogeneous nation states in order to avoid too much diversity within borders of a state. And after the Second World War, you had only 4 states in Europe that were multinational in their construction: the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and Belgium. Today, 3 of those states are gone.
Yeah.
So I think Europe has to be more honest about our difficulties managing diversity. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to manage diversity. We shouldn't try to take people in and look at the positive things. But we should be honest about how painful and difficult it is, and we haven't. So when Angela Merkel welcomes 1 million refugees and just saying, wir schaffen das, we can do this. It turns out that in real life things are not that easy. Yeah. And it means that a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. I believe that Europe in the coming years, they will face more confrontation, more polarization. We will see more terrorist attacks, and we will see the reaction among those populist parties for taking harsher measures against Muslims. And if you take the recent travel ban that was issued by Donald Trump, it's being welcomed by these parties in Europe, and they will push for the same thing if they get into government.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to ask you next. Do you think that the average person that maybe is living in France right now, where they have this major integration problem with a certain percentage of their population, do you think they're looking at Trump now and going, wow, you actually did it. You did what we should have done.
Absolutely.
And thus will then probably vote Le Pen.
Yes, and I think the mainstream parties bear a responsibility because they were not willing to face up to that problem, even though voters for many years have complained.
Yeah.
People were just telling me, you are stupid, you are backwards, why can't you manage this? Again, diversity is painful. Yeah. It's not easy. So now people welcome more radical forces to take care of that problem.
So basically, if you won't deal with something honestly, someone's going to come in with an easy answer. So if you were just the average citizen in France, and let's say France just completely closed their borders altogether, there's still an integration problem there. What's the best way for Denmark, if you want to answer it in that framework too? What would be the answer for the countries to get these people to be more integrated? That's what I think the average Frenchman obviously wants that. And I think that's ultimately what these people want too, if they could get a fuller picture, perhaps, of what Western civilization really is.
Well, I would start to reform the welfare state. And I will cut benefits so that people would be forced to provide for themselves at an earlier stage. Too many people in Europe from the Middle East, they never enter the labor market. And work is a very effective mechanism of integration and getting the sense of belonging. Too many of these people, they don't have a sense of belonging to society. They are outside. They never talk to native citizens, only at the social welfare office. They don't have colleagues. They live in these family communities. So cutting down the welfare state, because the welfare state is also built on the principle of similarity, that people share the same values, that they more or less share the same understanding of obligation and rights. But we are getting more and more diverse, and people have different understandings of what it means to be a citizen, of what a good life is. So we cannot fit all these people into a more homogeneous understanding of the welfare state that used to be the case. So forcing people to work at an earlier stage, and getting rid of hate speech laws, because Muslims, in fact, are also being prosecuted now for anti-Semitic speech in Europe. There are many Holocaust deniers among Muslims in Europe, radical imams. So they don't feel that we have a double standard. You know, we go after them, but we don't go after people who are criticizing Islam. For instance, France, that's a huge problem, where you don't have a blasphemy law, and Charlie Hebdo can really mock Islam, but they do have laws criminalizing denial of the Holocaust, which means that there are Muslims who are being prosecuted for anti-Semitism, while people critical of Islam are not being prosecuted for mocking Islam. I believe there is a difference, but I think it's a moral one, and it shouldn't be a legal one.